We're about to delve into some absolutely shameful antics from academics who try to discredit and silence a leading black professor because he challenged their race-baiting narrative. But first, we have further evidence of the Biden family's dodgy business dealings and pay-for-access business model. The House Oversight Committee has released powerful witness testimony of Biden's foreign influence peddling scheme, with Hunter Biden's former business partner, Tony Bobulinski, testifying. I want to be crystal clear from my direct personal experience and what I've subsequently come to learn. It is clear to me that Joe Biden was the brand being sold by the Biden family. Joining me to discuss this and much more is filmmaker Ami Horowitz. Ami, is there any doubt now that Joe Biden wasn't just involved in Hunter Biden's business dealings, he was the brand that was being sold to foreign actors seeking to gain influence in the US?
Oh, you mean that mogul Hunter Biden wasn't the selling point for these businesses across the world? No, I don't know how could you conclude that? As compared to Hunter Biden versus the Vice President Joe Biden, who would be the selling point? Who would be the brand there? No, look, obviously there's no question that Joe Biden was in fact the point of reference, the reason why anyone got involved with Hunter Biden or Hunter Biden businesses. That's obvious. The bigger question becomes, first of all, the timeline, right? Did it begin while he was vice president? And there's some evidence for that with Tony Bobulinski, or did it happen afterwards? And the truth is, look, a lot of this is really on Joe Biden himself, not because he was involved or not involved, because he could have diffused much of this if he was open and honest from the beginning and said, look, he said from the beginning, I was not involved in any way, shape, or form with his business. And then as evidence came out, the language changed. As more evidence came out, the language changed further, which indicates maybe he was hiding something. Maybe this did begin while he was vice president as opposed to after he was vice president. Maybe it lends credence to what happened with Burisma. The problem is we don't know. I think one of the great, like, if you look at the comparison between how the Democrats and the media have gone after two different stories, the Joe Biden story and the Russia hoax story about the president's involvement in Russia. You then to see and uncover the difference between how they're handling the two things. When it came to Russia, the media took almost everything, no matter how fantastical, no matter how unbelievable, as fact. They didn't spend time questioning it. They didn't spend time saying, well, this doesn't make some sense, or let's find out where the underlying evidence came from before we start announcing it as fact. This is what led directly to the first impeachment, right? That the Democrats obviously went after the president with, frankly, less evidence, with vigor, and the media, carrying their water, did the same. But when it comes to this issue, the testimony of Bobulinski isn't even the top 50 news items on CNN.com. In some cases, they don't cover it at all. So the question becomes how the two are handling the two different cases, and it becomes clear the bias that's involved.
Oh, absolutely. And I guess so many in the media have egg on their faces because when these stories first began being reported, when that laptop was discovered by the New York Post, much of the media joined in the disinformation campaign to say this was some sort of a Russian plot or the laptop wasn't real. And even Joe Biden at some point made that claim, knowing full well that it was real and that everything that came from that laptop was legitimate. It was Hunter Biden's material. It was not something that had been planted there by some Russian agent. It really is astonishing. But there are elements of the media who are starting to belatedly take an interest in the Biden family, including Joe's brother, Jim. He's facing some media scrutiny. Politico is reporting that Jim's played a major role in a company called Americo, which is the US government has accused now of massive Medicare fraud. Tell us a little bit about this, Ami, and it's, again, interesting that it's being reported at all, given the media's reluctance to cover these stories.
Yeah, first of all, going back to what we were talking about before, he said the media having egg on their faces. That would only be the case if they were self-reflective at all which they are not. So I don't think they look at themselves and say, oh, God, we screwed that up, unfortunately. Look, Jim Biden, I don't know, for some reason, it seems like a lot of presidents have very embarrassing brothers. I don't know why that is, but Jim Biden is another in a long list of embarrassments to the family. Well, that would be the case if Joe Biden wasn't as big an embarrassment himself to the family. But Jim Biden, this is a bigger issue because we're talking about actual Medicare fraud, right? We're not talking about being unethical. This is really becoming more clearly illegal. I think that's a significant difference. That's much, much harder to ignore, particularly if you have any scruples at all in the media. But yeah, look, I think this is another example of the Biden family corruption across the board. Hunter and his son, and possibly even the president himself. It's just another one of those issues that you have to scratch your head and say, why isn't this being covered in a larger way, at least to figure out what's going on? Okay, I'm not looking for the media to come out and just condemn the Biden family straightly. If I want to at least see them say, hey, let's ask the right questions. And I don't know, let's be hopeful, Rita. Let's hope that this is the first in a series of the media saying, we got to take this seriously. Let's take the high road on this.
Let's hope so. Now, we all remember the BLM riots, the destruction and violence across cities in the US. There were murders, assaults, arson, widespread looting, all in response to the supposed systematic racism of the police force and the notion that just scores of unarmed black men were being killed by police. Well, at the time, I remember quoting data from a leading Harvard professor disputing this entirely flawed notion. And in recent days, we've learned what that Harvard professor, Roland Fryer, faced for publishing his inconvenient facts, inconvenient to the race baiters.
We didn't find any racial bias in police shootings. Now, that was really surprising to me because I expected to see it. The little-known fact is I had 8 full-time RAs that it took to do this over nearly a year. When I found the surprising result, I hired 8 fresh ones and redid it to make sure. They came up with the same exact answer, and I thought it was robust. And then I went to go give it, and my God, all hell broke loose.
And Nami, let's hear from Professor Fryer just how quickly he faced opposition to his findings. And you can tell me what happened to him next, but let's hear from him.
It was a 104-page, dense academic economics paper with a 150-page appendix, okay? It was posted for 4 minutes when I got my first email. This is full of shit. Doesn't make any sense. And I wrote back, how'd you read it that fast? That's amazing. You are a genius.
Ami, tell me what Claudine Gay, we remember her, tried to do to this man and other academics as well, and why they're so scared of his indisputable findings.
Well, this is one of the few times I say thank God for tenure because, they would do whatever they can to get rid of him. No, he's become a pariah to the academic community. He's not even like a Republican. This is not a right-wing individual. That's what's crazy about this. He's just a truth teller. Look, you were showing before scenes. I recognize those scenes because I was there. I was at the Portland riots. I watched the BLM rioters attack a federal building, a federal courthouse. I went to many of the, if not most of the BLM riots across the country that year. And I also did my own studies. I actually also I went over the 3 years prior to BLM, going through all the different examples of a police officer shooting an unarmed black person. And the numbers are astonishing, okay, and clear. To say there's no racial bias is putting it, frankly, lightly, because actually, you would say any bias at all, you might see it against white people because actually far more white people are killed or unarmed by the police than black people. And if you adjust that number for actual interaction with the police, the number is actually even higher than that. Look, it is gross. And by the way, just to put a finer, underline that, when I did look at those numbers, but how many unarmed black people were killed, you would say, well, even one is too many. First of all, more than half of them were killed by black officers. That takes the racial bias out altogether. And if you continue to break down each individual circumstance, you start seeing that it's not that a white officer is executing a black person, but there's some kind of tragic mistake that went down, or the black person actually attacked the officer. He may have been unarmed and attacked. There are a lot of these circumstances that lead you to understand why a shooting may have taken place within context, right? But of course, when the media is looking to talk about this, it is done without any context whatsoever. They want to go to it's narrative uber alles, right, Rita? Narrative over everything. That's and by the way, I want to be clear, this happens with the right and the left. I don't like when people on the right have a narrative and simply won't get off of it, even if proof is shown that they are incorrect. Now, I would argue it happens more on the left and the right, but nonetheless, we have to be intellectually honest here. And the reality is, look, does racism exist in our country and around the world? Of course it does. Does racism exist in the police departments of our country? Of course it does. Has it come to a point where we're saying we have there is a full tragedy going on across our country, an epidemic? Absolutely not. There is no, as I looked at myself, as the professor said, there's no evidence whatsoever. In fact, the evidence may even show the opposite.
Ami Horowitz, thank you so much for your time this evening.